now adult children, once the child reaches an adult, to then go back and sue the mental health professionals that were involved in the child's former treatment around high custody or high conflict custody litigation. So the reason I, kind of chose this topic for this week is because I ran across an article recently where in Arizona, a child in it is caught in the post-divorce parental spousal conflict. And I was reading the article, and it's your classic spousal abuse kind of conflict situation. And the court ordered the child protective separation and the child out to Family Bridges, which is a 4-day workshop by Rorschach and Rand. Um, and then the child turned age 18 and has now sued both Arizona and Family Bridges, saying that the separation, they separated and put him with an abusive targeted parent, and and that there was all sorts of violations of his rights and things. And so that got me thinking, because I've always believed that the child is in the best position to hold the mental health people accountable for their diagnosis and treatment once they become adult. So, if from my perspective, if a child of psychological abuse and this family court pathology were to then um, turn 18, become an adult, and awaken as to what the family dynamics are now as a young adult, maybe 20, 22 or something, I think they would have a good case to go back to the forensic psychologist and the reunification therapist, there's no such thing, and hold them accountable for their failure and duty to protect and um, obligations. And so I've always believed that that was the um, of immense vulnerability for the mental health people involved in the family courts. The parents, the targeted parents, lawsuits against them for spousal abuse and child abuse and all sorts of things are also, I think, well grounded in ethical violations and failure duty to protect. But I think the child's position, once they reach majority, the age of majority, is even stronger relative to this. Now, in this situation in Arizona, based on just superficial patterns, because the child's being sent to, Family Bridges, it's most likely that the courts and everybody on the targeted parent side believed that there was this alienation thing, and that was that we have a narcissistic uh, parent in this situation who's creating a delusional disorder and factitious attachment pathology. And the problem was, and this is a problem with Family Bridges, and is they didn't get a diagnosis of child abuse that would warrant the protective separation. So if the child, the current now adult child over 18, if their allegation is true that being sent to the targeted parent was abusive because that parent's abusive of them, well, then that's a good lawsuit against Arizona and Family Bridges, because nobody did a proper assessment and they sent the child to be with an abusive parent. Or is the allied parent psychologically abusing the child, which justifies a protective separation and then the workshop of Family Bridges, because the allied parent is psychologically abusing the child. So in that case, then Family Bridges in Arizona are fine if they have a mental health professional who's diagnosed child abuse, and the allied parent sues them, and they go, we got a diagnosis of child abuse, and that's why we did the protective separation and the treatment. So the problem is in Arizona is they didn't get that diagnosis. So now it's unclear whether the child was sent to an abusive parent or not, and so everybody becomes vulnerable at that point. So anyway, this got me thinking about the whole situation, and so I want to talk about potentially now adult children of psychological child abuse by a narcissistic borderline parent surrounding high custody or high conflict custody litigation. I want to talk about their potential grounds for suing the mental health providers for the failure in their duty to protect obligations. So there may be some now adult children who will tune into this over the course of time. And so I'm kind of talking to the child, not so much to the targeted parent, because you're not a now adult child of psychological child abuse. I'm not talking to the child either, because the child, adults are supposed to be taking care of the child and resolving the situation. So the child just that's active in this situation just needs to go be a child. But for the now adult survivors of child psychological abuse by a pathological, narcissistic, borderline, dark personality parent, that's the pathology. There's no such thing as parental alienation. So it's adult survivors of child psychological abuse. For those uh, people who may tune into this, I want to first clarify issues of responsibility and blame, because those get very twisty in these families, about what those two kind of concepts are. And so it's helpful to begin with to sort of untangle those two ideas, responsibility and blame. So, starting with responsibility, and you see that first thing, when there's an event, all the people around that event share responsibility for that event. Okay, we all share responsibility for creating it and for fixing it. That's just the nature of responsibility. So, deciding and figuring out who's responsible for what is like socially negotiated, and you talk about it and you kind of figure that out. But there's responsibility all the way around. Blame, on the other hand, is trying to isolate all the responsibility into one location, and that's to punish somebody for things. Okay. So that's important to understand. Responsibility is about fixing things. Blame is about punishing somebody. So in family situations, we're not interested in figuring out who to punish for the divorce or the marriage. The other spouse might, the spousal stuff get in. You're the fault, and you need to be blamed for this. But that's not the child's issue. That's not the therapist's issue. That's not anybody else's issue. Our issue is we need to fix the problem. So we need to figure out what's responsible for causing the problem so we can fix the problem. And we got all sorts of pieces that are causing things. So kids are caught in the middle of stuff, move away from blame. It's not useful in the family context. However, in legal settings and regarding um, punishment for malpractice and stuff, blame is a relevant concept. And so we're going to locate it down to where was the obligation that failed in this situation. So we're starting to look at responsibility and blame. Is the child carry any responsibility and blame for the situation? No. Okay, so let me pull that up again and be real clear on this. The child has no responsibility for any of the events that took place, and is not to blame for any of the events that took place. Okay, because the nature of the child's brain, they're still developing. They're vulnerable. They're supposed to socially reference parents. They're supposed to be manipulated by parents. About everyday, normal day range things. Time to put your toys away, and the child puts their toys away. They're supposed to follow the guidance of parents as children, and they're not adult to be able. So the children have no responsibility and no blame in this situation. Now the children, the now adult survivors, may feel a lot of responsibility and blame because they're the one who acted on all this stuff. They're the one that says, I don't want to be. And no. So that's just where it gets all twisty, and we can figure that out in therapy. But for the now adult children, no, you have no responsibility, you have no blame in this situation. Parent one, okay, and I don't care which parent that is, has partial responsibility to fix the problem. So they're either partially causing it or partially not fixing it, or so there's partial responsibility, and there's no blame. Parent two, there's partial responsibility and no blame, and I'll explain that in a second. The therapist, however, has full responsibility to fix the problem, and the licensed mental health professional has duty of care and a duty to protect obligations. So it's the reason it's not the, let's say, the allied parent. That's a damaged human, okay, likely from unresolved trauma from their own childhood. They are a victim of child psychological abuse or child physical abuse, sexual abuse, who's all grown up now. So we have a child survivor of abuse who becomes an adult who does psychological abuse with their kid. Is that child abuse victim who's now all grown up, are they responsible for being a child abuse victim? No, not really. They're doing what they're doing because they're a damaged human. Okay, it's not their responsibility, and the blame, it gets kind of fuzzy with them. The targeted parent, at the same time, selected that other person to make them a mom or dad to this family, so they've got partial responsibility in choosing who that other person is for that child and in navigating some of this stuff. Are they creating the pathology in the child? No, no, no. So it's not like that kind of responsibility or stuff. But the targeted parent, they can get manipulated by a narcissist or borderline. They can't see who that person was. They've got presented a false image. Are they to blame or not really? But yeah, kind of. So both of those roles, are they responsible for fixing things? Well, they're the parents, kind of, but they don't understand pathology. Who's responsible? Okay. Who's responsible for fixing it? The therapist. So the therapist, the mental health professional, licensed mental health professional, has gone to get a degree and is being given money to fix the problem. So it's their responsibility to fix the problem. So the licensed mental health professional has two legally obligating duties: the duty of care and the duty to protect. So there are four roles in trauma. In child abuse trauma. There's the abusive parent, the victimized child, the protective parent, and the bystander role. And if you work trauma, you know this. The bystander role is the one who should protect the child. Now, this is classic in sex abuse victimization. So we have the father who's incest or sexually abusing the child. So we got the abusive parent, we got the victimized child. The protected parent is the mother in that situation. Okay. But, in that trauma, when you have incest pattern, the mother is also often in what's called the betrayer role, the one who should protect and doesn't. And so she sacrifices the child to the father or stepfather in order to save the marriage. So that's the dynamic within the sex abuse family. So we come in looking for, where's the mother? Okay, protecting the child. And a lot of times we'll find her in that bystander betrayer role of she should be protecting the child, but she's not. And in the family courts, that's the mental health professional. Okay, it's the mental health professional who should be protecting the child, but isn't. So they're in the bystander role, the mental health professional, and they're in the betrayer role because they're not protecting the child. They're not making the diagnosis of child abuse. They're not telling that dad to stop abusing that little girl. They're not fulfilling their obligations, duty to protect obligations. So, in terms of responsibility, for the mental health professional, it was the responsibility of the involved mental health professional to accurately diagnose the child abuse and protect the child. The abusive parent is damaged and needs treatment. The protective parent is destabilized and needs to be empowered. The victimized child needs to be protected. So all three of those other roles in the family are locked into the situation and are all needing intervention. It is the obligation, and they're getting paid for it, for the mental health professional to come in and intervene with this family and make sure treatment happens and everybody's protected and everybody's safe and to take care of things. So it it was the responsibility of the involved mental health professional to accurately diagnose and protect the child, and all three of those other roles are caught in the dynamic. Okay, so they're all the client. So it's not their obligation to fix their family, they're caught in their family. So let me use the analogy to cancer. Okay, another pathology. So we're going to shift over to a medical pathology. Let's say, God forbid, let's say you have cancer. Okay, so the patient has cancer. Okay, it's contained. Is it their responsibility that they have cancer? Well, they didn't create the cancer. They didn't cause the cancer, but kind of, they need to get to a doctor. They need to get treatment for the cancer. So they do have some responsibility for the, getting treatment and what they're doing with the cancer. And maybe they worked around, asbestos or something. So who knows? But no, they're not really. You wouldn't say, you're responsible for your cancer. You caused it. But so then, are they responsible for treating their cancer? Well, kind of. They're supposed to get to a doctor, but really it's the doctor who's supposed to know all the stuff about what the type of cancer it is and all the tests and what the treatments are for that. Now, do all cancer treatments work? No, sometimes the patient dies. The best treatment we have for the cancer, and sometimes the patient still dies because we all die in life and diseases take us. So it's not the doctor's fault that the cancer killed the patient. However, it's the doctor's obligation to do everything about curing the cancer. Okay, so you see kind of how we're navigating responsibility and stuff. So now, if the doctor doesn't know anything about cancer, they're a plastic surgeon, they're a cosmetic surgeon. Okay, they know nothing about cancer, but they decide to take a cancer patient. They start treating all kind of messed up, and the patient dies from the cancer because of all the messed up treatment from this cosmetic surgeon. Well, then that cosmetic surgeon's to blame for the patient's death. Now, does cancer kill people? Yeah, I can't. But holy cow, that we didn't even get proper treatment for the cancer because we have a cosmetic surgeon doing cancer treatment. He shouldn't be doing cancer. So that's the issue of responsibility and blame that we're going into here. It's not the patient's fault, blame, or it's not the patient's responsibility to deal with what's going on. It's the doctor's. And all we're asking from the doctors is a reasonable professional level of care. So let's take a look at what that is here within profession. So the ethical violation involved for all these forensic psychologists, custody evaluations, and reunification therapists, everybody who missed the diagnosis of child abuse and failed to protect the child, is standard 2.01 boundaries of competence. So the mental health professional was practicing beyond the boundaries of their competence in attachment pathology, in child abuse and complex trauma, in delusional thought disorders, and family systems pathology. And as a result, because they were practicing beyond the boundaries of their competence, they misdiagnosed the pathology and became participants in the child abuse because they misdiagnosed which parent was abusing the child because they were not competent in doing what they were supposed to be doing. Okay, they didn't do the proper cancer tests and they're a cosmetic surgeon and the patient died from the cancer. So that's the ethical violation primarily. There's others that could potentially be involved, but that's the main one. Now, the issue for the malpractice is the negligence. And so Google negligence, and it's the failure to take proper care in doing something. If you Google, a Cornell school definition of negligence, we have negligence is the failure to behave with the level of care that a reasonable person would have exercised under the same circumstances. So that reasonable person, that's the criteria. Either a person's acts or omissions of actions can be found negligent. The omission of actions is considered negligent only when the person has a duty to act, such as a duty to help someone because of their own previous misconduct. Okay, so for the mental health professionals involved in the matter, they have two duties. First is the duty of care. And so Wikipedia duty of care. In tort law, A duty of care is a legal obligation that is imposed on an individual, requiring adherence to a standard of reasonable care to avoid careless acts that could foreseeably harm others and lead to claim in negligence. Okay, so that's one issue. The mental health professional did not have to use reasonable care in their assessment, diagnosis, and treatment because they don't were incompetent. They don't have the background to do that, to be doing the work that they were doing. Then the second duty is the duty to protect. So from Wikipedia, duty to protect. In medical law and medical ethics, the duty to protect is the responsibility of a mental health professional to protect patients and others from foreseeable harm. So you can see right there, we have foreseeable harm is going to be one of the issues. And yeah, you got a custody conflict. You got, allegations of child abuse both directions. The differential diagnosis is a possible shared persecutory delusion. So did they assess for it? That's a differential and if they didn't assess for it, then that's foreseeable harm because it's a possible factitious attachment pathology and you didn't even assess it. And so that's where I'm just seeing huge negligence on the part of all the mental health people, all the forensic psychologists involved in these situations. Now, the parents, the targeted parents, can hold them accountable on the same issues, but I think the kid, as an adult, if the now child of that situation gains insight into what happened, I think they can go back to the mental health person and say, whoa, 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 what happened here? And so if there's any adult children, the first step on that would be to get your records. Okay, request your records from the mental health person. All the chart notes, everything. Just give me all my records regarding my treatment. I think you'll be in good standing at that if you're an adult who's requesting your medical records as a child. And the targeted parent, if you're going through, just make sure you get solid records. Your child may want to sue their mental health people coming down the road, and so just keep that in mind down the road. Duty of care. So this is from this article, journal article, and you can Google these things and find them. That's how I found them. Google is so common. So this is from Davies and Shaw, 2010. So duty of care. Physicians have a legal duty to provide a certain standard of skill and care to their existing patients. The legal duty of care is created when a physician agrees to treat a patient who has requested his or her service. So the duty of care is established with all these mental health people. In determining what that duty requires, physicians should consider whether the care they are providing is that which a reasonable physician would provide under the circumstances. Okay, so let me take a second to emphasize that. Yeah. So let me take a second to emphasize that, the reasonable care. And so that's where you look at the differential diagnosis and attachment pathology. Only cause is child abuse by one parent or the other. Did they conduct a proper risk assessment for child abuse? That's why I'm using the word proper risk assessment in that question. Did they conduct a proper, because that's reasonable care. If it's possible child abuse, and no, they didn't exercise reasonable care. If they don't have a diagnosis on their forms and their paperwork and their reports and stuff, if they don't have a diagnosis, then they are indicating that there is no diagnosable pathology present. So if there's no diagnosis of child abuse, child psychological abuse, then the mental health professional is saying for a fact that they have verified that there is no child psychological abuse present, because if there was, they would have put the diagnosis there. Okay. So one way or the other, there's no diagnosis, so it's not there. There's no schizophrenia there. There's no autism there. There's no child abuse there. If there's child abuse, a possibility, they can put it as a rule-out diagnosis, or they can put it as a provisional diagnosis if they're a little more certain about it. But if there's no diagnosis, that's why they get really in danger when they absolutely put nothing down there. They are saying that nothing is present. So, in my view, as a clinical psychologist, the now adult survivors of child psychological abuse by parents surrounding child custody conflict may have legal grounds for malpractice lawsuits against the involved forensic custody evaluators and reunification therapists. There's no such thing. For negligent malpractice and failure in their duty of care and duty to protect obligations. Now, I just want to note here, I'm a clinical psychologist, and I'm not an attorney, and my opinions about the potential malpractice of the psychologist is as a psychologist looking at their other doctor kind of work. I'm not opining on the law. I'm just saying, as I'm looking at the criteria of the law applied to what I do, duty of care, duty to protect, these psychologists are not meeting their obligations. And so with that, I'm going to wrap up my Sunday talk on the now adult survivors of child psychological abuse and their uh, potential redress of grievances against former mental health professionals who failed to protect them because of the mental health professionals' incompetence and negligent incompetence in the performance of their duties. So with that, I'm going to head off to my Sunday here. Good luck, everybody, and we'll check in next week about another aspect of the family courts here.